So this is SIG Network Policy Sub-Project meeting. Today is November 23, 2020. This is an official community meeting, so please be nice with each other. We have the code of conduct running here, and let's get it started. So first of all, we have some new folks here. Do you want to present yourself, Vamsi and Vinay? Rich, I think you are new also. I know you, but are you new in this meeting?
Yeah, I can introduce myself, Ricardo. My name is Vinay Banai. I'm with Google, and I'm a technical lead manager for some of the aspects of Kubernetes. And one of my team members was involved, Zhang was involved, and she has moved to do other things. So I'm substituting in her place.
Great, thank you. I remember you from the last meeting, yeah, but thank you for coming.
Yeah. This is I think it's my second meeting, so yeah.
Great.
Yeah, I work closely with Govind also, yeah.
Okay, nice. Someone else?
Yep, I can go next. My name is Vamsi. I am part of Azure Container Networking Interface. I recently joined this team and started to learn, so I'm here to learn more. Yeah, and I'm also working on Azure Network Policy Manager. Yeah.
Okay, so you are from Microsoft? Yes.
Correct. Yes.
Okay, great. So, folks, I'm going just to put the attendees here. If someone just so we don't forget new folks. Anyone that wants to join us and put the attendees names here would be nice. Would be great. Anyone else? Rich, I think you are not new, right? So we can move forward. Do you want to present yourself?
Sure. Yeah, my name's Rich Renner. Work at Sunder Networks, and I've been hanging around with these guys on a couple of different areas, which is how I ended up in this meeting. Thanks for having me, Ricardo.
Great. Okay, welcome, folks. So before starting to pass through the FTD policy doc and the CAP reviews, and I hope this is going to be a soft meeting. We've had a meet with Tim Hawking last Friday, me, Jay, Andrew, Abhishek, and Tim. I don't think we forgot anyone. Because I asked Tim some directions so we could move forward with the namespace by name selector, because we have some problems between if we were going to change the namespace selector, or how could we move that forward. And Tim suggested us that we move with the API namespace labels. That's a cap that suggests that any new namespace got a virtual label or reserved label. That's a kubernetes.io/metadata.name. So the cap is here. I'm gonna share my screen with you fast and quick. Hey, hello, Jay.
Well, what's up, man?
One more cap for you. Yeah. So this is the cap that Tim and Jay started writing on Friday, and I've put some other stuff. I've just made some small corrections on Sunday. And the idea of this cap is basically that we propose that namespace have an immutable label when created by the API server that represents the metadata.name of the object and turns namespace selectable by the name. So the idea here, I think, is that we deprecate the cap of the namespace by name selector. And instead, we've got some documentation about when I want to select a namespace by name instead of a namespace by label, I would use this label that always represent the name of the namespace. Okay. So anyone got any question about this? Please.
To be clear, the whole point here is that every namespace from now on will have a label on it. So for those of you that don't understand the overall problem, that are new, people have been complaining for a very long time that they want to just write a network policy against a namespace without having to know what the labels are. And nobody's been able to do that. So we wrote this big KEP about how we could change the API so that CNI providers have some, so you could write a network policy YAML that said like namespace as name. Problem with that, once we started going down the logic of it, was that Tim was a little concerned that older policies would be by default less secure than what users wanted because of the way that the top level primitives are logically combined. So the simplest solution to this is like, why don't we just label every namespace forever so that every namespace is guaranteed to have one label that's predictable, so that anybody that wants to write policy against a namespace can very easily do so, even if they have no idea what labels are in the namespace, because they know that every single namespace has a default k8s.io / my namespace name, and then the name of the namespace, right? So it seems kind of meta, but it's like, once you look at it, it's like super obvious. So that's it. It's probably the simplest KEP in the world. It's like 6 lines of code so that every time a namespace is created, you label it with its own name.
And they won't allow anyone to change that label. If someone tries to change that label, the validation wouldn't allow. So that's 6 lines that will solve the problem of like 4 years, right?
Yeah.
All right. So anybody got any question about this? Want to discuss a little bit? That's okay.
Yeah, I think the nice thing about this also is that I think we were mostly tackling it so far, or at least the context I've been hearing is that this allows for like single namespace selection, but then you can do multiple namespace selection with matched expressions, right? Like you can say Kubernetes.io metadata name, and then like that's the key, and then operator in values like a list of namespaces. So this also accounts for a selection of namespaces by name without having to use like without having to use labels, like by just collecting its names, right?
Yeah. I think it's like, that's a simple but powerful idea, right? Because we are still selecting by labels. Everybody knows how to select by labels, but still you can match expressions, you can match the whatever.
No, I guess I guess what I was saying was like one of the requirements that we were talking about is like, I don't just want to select one namespace. I want to be able to select like a group of namespaces that have well-known names, but they may not have labels. So it does sound like this can be done with match expressions. Like it's not as elegant as like, you know, having to just put like a list of names in it, but it's pretty doable with match expressions. I don't think the syntax will get too ugly or anything like that.
Yeah, that's true. You can do a multi-select pretty easily.
Okay. So anything else about this?
Yeah, you're right. I think we can deprecate that other KEP or withdraw it, Ricardo. Let's wait for this to get approved, but yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really think about that, but you're right. There's literally no work to do for that other KEP if this goes through. We literally just have to update the docs.
Yeah, unless you want to write a KEP just to update the docs, but I don't think this is like.
No, I don't want anymore.
I know you love KEPs, Jay.
I'm
You are
done
the
with it.
KEP owner of everything.
Oh
yeah.
man.
So let's move forward. Okay, so the next item here is to continue about the FTD policy doc with Gobin, but I don't see him here, so no Gobin here. If he arrives later, we can ask him. So okay, next one. We have left cluster scope because Abhishek told us that probably today he was going to present the template policies and the ideas of the cluster scope. Do you want to speak something about that, Abhishek?
Yeah, I think last week I mentioned that we were working on the user stories and we documented all of them. And this past week, we had a follow-up on that, and we have a proposal, and based on that, we wrote some templates, example policies which satisfy those use cases. And the team, we all, when I was also part of it, we all went to the existing user stories and the proposed example templates for each of those user stories which satisfy those requirements. And I think we got only halfway through all the user stories because of all the discussions that went around. So I think after the Thanksgiving break, we will hopefully complete all the proposal, or rather, we'll go through all the proposed templates and examples for the use cases. And once we have satisfied all the use cases, I think we'll have a hardened proposal. And based on the discussions last week, we kind of tweaked a little bit on the semantics on the selectors in order to satisfy the use cases. So I think I've already shared the Google document with the team. Maybe we can pin that in this document somewhere so that anyone who wants to take a look at the proposal and the sample examples can take a look at that document. But yeah, that's the status so far. Hopefully, I think based on the timelines, this week we're going to cancel the meeting. So it's going to be next week in the first week of December when we finish up all the proposals, or rather the examples. And then I think maybe midweek of December is when we come here with the proposal or some sort of a sketch, which we can discuss on the broader team meeting.
All right. All right. Anyone? Any question? So I've pasted the cluster scope and network policy user stories here. I've pinned it in the top of the document, so I don't need to always be scrolling down to search it. This is this. Sorry, is this one right, Abhishek?
Yes, that's the correct one.
Okay.
Thanks for doing that.
Great, thank you. So, no gold bin yet? No, yeah. So about the cap review, so we got Abhishek's one, the port ranges, I think that's moving. I've got some feedback from team and also from Sean from Calico Tigera team about dropping the exception, and team also proposed that instead of creating a new port range struct, only inserting a unique port integer field inside the network policy port structure. So the CNIs could see if you have an end port, then you could consider that as a range instead of a single port. I have updated the, let me, port range, it's here. I have updated the cap to reflect teams and Sean suggestions. Also, then Winship in a past comment told that exceptions might be an overkill, also Sean. So please take a look, folks. I did some updates. I think was yesterday. The old commit is here. I am not squashing anything, so you can take a look into what I have changed before squashing stuffs and see if this is enough for you. I think that's a simple proposal, but yeah, I think that solves also the problem, like having the new field, the new import field, and just that, and like not having exceptions. I think that might be problematic for a future if we wanna add exceptions and the CNIs doesn't know about the exceptions. But on the other hand, I don't know if like we have a strong user case that exceptions would make their part here. So please take a look. Anybody got any? Yeah, go ahead, Andrew.
I think the whole thing with the exceptions kind of goes back to like the user stories and requirements. Do we remember, like back when we were kind of chatting about this, were some of the requirements that folks mentioned like asking for like many exceptions within a large port range, or is it usually just like one port? Because I think if it's just one port, then I agree, like the exception is overkill. But if we know of cases where a user might have like a handful of ports in a large range, I think that's worth bringing up.
The original user stories were, there's two. One, so I guess I was the first person to propose it, and my thinking was old legacy, like big data applications where you'd have things opening ports up or port ranges, because all the like old distributed systems that used to do things on random ports and stuff. That was like what I was kind of thinking of. But then Cody brought up another user story around VMs, right? Like you want to run a VM as a pod. And to me, the VM as a pod is also I don't think that's an exception one either. Like I think they're both, the big thing is the range, and the exception is not really putting an exception into the range. To any of the user stories that I remember wasn't particularly important. It was just some idea that we added on later. But I don't remember any user story associated with that. And I think we even have a pretty good workaround to it, right? Which is that, you just have 2 port ranges, or have n port ranges, n plus k port ranges for k exceptions, right?
Yep, that sounds good to me. As long as we know that like most of the asks have just been around like single ports, I think that's totally justified. So yeah, sounds good to me.
I think that we would not have like just single ports. Like the network, the security policy of my company, it's blocked like the port map and the Samba ports. So you can allow any traffic to any ports, but Samba ports and port maps and NFS ports. But I think that still, if you have like a small number of exceptions, it's viable to do with multiple port ranges instead of like creating exceptions and having problems with the CNI providers, right?
Right. So I guess like that's what my question was, is like, what's the usual amount of exceptions in a range, and how high does that number have to be before we make that trade-off of like API syntax, as opposed to just like removing exceptions and just putting multiple ranges? So like for your company or your example, if you were to use the endports API right now, like would that policy become too difficult to read because you have too many ranges that are segmented, or do you think like it's tolerable, that it wouldn't warrant to have an exceptions field?
Oh, okay, so I think that I have 2 scenarios. The first one is that I would be more secure, because instead of allowing the traffic for any place and blocking this on my edge firewall, or like asking for the security folks and a security exception, I would, or like having a 65,000 ports described and only that the ones that I don't want removed. I would have like a bunch of port ranges. I still think, in my opinion, that the network policy, the way that it was made, it's difficult for the end user to read, even if we have or not like the exceptions field. But in my opinion, I think that if we wanna evolve this better than just putting an exception, I think that this way we would need like a V2 network policy. Nowadays, it's still hard to read the network policy. So even if we don't have the port ranges, so I think port ranges would make things more secure and also like more readable.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I'm just trying to figure out like what are the use cases behind exceptions, and like on average, how many exceptions are we thinking, right? Because like to me, if like the usual exception is like 1 or 2 or 3 ports, then like that totally seems fine. I'm trying to see if there's ever a case where a user has to have like 10 exceptions, and at that point, like having 11 ranges to account for the 10 exceptions seems pretty, like it's that, I mean, like it's probably still better than having to list all the ports individually, but I'm trying to figure out if like that would become kind of crazy in the API to have 11 different ranges to account for 10 exceptions. But what I'm hearing is that most cases that have come up with this is usually just like 1 or 2 exceptions, in which case I think it's probably fine to exclude it.
Yeah, I'm gonna also take a look into the rules of the security policy of my company, just to make sure that I am not like, just so we have like a strong case about how many ports usually they block. Cell phone is dead and I don't have to factor. Yeah. Okay.
Rich, I see you're unmuting.
Yeah, I was just going to add, I think that's a good heuristic, by the way. I was looking at some firewall rules here on the other screen, and the quantity, I guess it just, the idea of having these exceptions, I think, is attractive, and certainly folks are happy to talk about it, but I just haven't seen a case where folks have had more than 10 specifics in any one independent flow. Now, if you took like all the firewall rules, and then I took some from like a consulting engagement, then I would have a list that is significant enough. I guess my only comment was that I like your new rule of thumb. I think we should use that as a steering guide, because certainly 10 is a good number. Do not have to make 11, because we keep coming back to it. So I guess I'm +1 on this pseudo heuristic as we go forward. It's valid.
Yeah, I was actually going to say that 10 is where I think it's too much. But yeah, I mean, if we're saying like 10 is the most, and anything above 10 it becomes too much, but anything below 10 is like reasonable, and a user can grok that, then yeah, like I think that's a decent turning point. So
I guess just even getting close to that, you know what I mean? I haven't even seen where folks have been specific enough, you know, in any one particular case to have that many sockets. But VMs certainly change that.
Right. Okay. Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. I'm gonna use my viral tweet to ask people's opinions in Twitter. Just kidding. Yeah. So let's go forward to, okay, is Gobin here? Not yet? Yeah, okay, so probably we will leave this for like next year. So the next one is about the Dan's proposal. If someone left some thoughts there, but I think that Dan's also is not trying to move forward with that. I think that's does anybody wants to take a look into that and discuss about that, or that's a no-go for now? What do you think about that? Anybody took a look into that?
So I took a look at that last week but I did not look into very specifics of each of the cases that he's trying to address. But on a high level, I quite agree with the status part of the KEP, but I'm not quite sure about the versioning part, that whether it's that useful. I was a little confused also as to how he wants to version. Is it the user who's going to be adding versions to the min version field to their policies, or is it the CNI plugins who are going to be updating some sort of a min version that they support? And if it's on the user side, I don't know whether it's a great user experience to be adding versions to their policies in addition to all the things that they have to add into their policies. So I was not quite sold on the versioning aspect, but the status is something that is very, I think is quite important. And it's a good way to report realization of the rules from the CNI to the users.
Yeah, I think that about the versioning, what the original proposal of Dan was that when you use specific fields from specific network policy, the API mutate the object to insert the min version. So the CNI would know also about if the min version from the CNI was the same as the min version from the API object. But I think that about this was a no-go from Tim and other folks, because they don't want to mutate the object, the final object, with the status. Like if you insert the protocol as CTP, the API was going to mutate the object and insert the status version equal to v121, I think. So I think that this one was a no-go. I was also actually also confused about the min version thing, the version thing inside the API, because I agree with you that the user experience wouldn't be like.
Yeah, the other thing was that, let's say the CNI provider supports certain advanced features, but does not support SCTP, which was like an older version, min version. So now, if the policy is created with the min version, which is advanced, and it also has a SCTP protocol in there, now it's kind of like a from a CNI's perspective, it sees that, okay, I do support this advanced feature, then I'm going to support this policy because the min version matches with its own min version, but it does not support an older feature, which is the SCTP protocol. And now, so it's kind of partially supporting this policy, which would then reflect a partial status. And I think Dan does capture this kind of a scenario, but it's still a bit, it's not really entirely solving the problem. I think the problem can be solved just by putting a status wherein the CNI provider inputs, or reports a good enough, clear error message saying that why this policy was not realized, or without the need for min versions.
Yeah, like on the whole user side of things, like I think the intention was that the API server adds the min version and the client, or like the CNI, is expected to read it and like, yeah, like implement it based on the min version. But the problem is that with that we run into the same problem we would run with other API fields for min version. So there's like this initial hump that clients need to actually read min version before min version becomes usable. And I think that's kind of like the part that for me, it doesn't seem really with it. But I agree on status. Like I feel like, and Jay has brought this up a few times too, like if you take the FQDM policy thing as an example, like let's say we told CNIs to implement FQDM policy, like I still think it should be on the server side, but if we had CNIs implement it, those rules where a CNI resolves the domain and then applies rules to a policy, like that feels like something that should be written into a network policy status, and the CNI reads the status and applies rules, as opposed to a controller like trying to write into spec, and like the user also tries to write into spec, and then those two conflict. So yeah, I agree, like both for reporting whether a rule was applied, but also for controllers to write what extra policy should be enforced by the CNI. Like I think that's a pretty useful thing to have in the API.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, me too. Okay. So let's hope at least the status part gets shipped and we can provide the users feedback about the network policies. Yes. So the last item here in the agenda is about this services selector. I think that we have voted into the services selector thing. Actually, it was the node selector, but then we changed it to services selector. I can't remember why. I think that folks realized that the services selectors, they were like easier and better. But I don't have like bandwidth to write about this. So if someone wants to get this cap and start writing a document like we've made to the other proposals, and also the document that like the same as Go being made to FTDN policy, it would be great. So please take a look and reach us. The idea of this is like having a services selector for the egress policy, so you can select a service instead of selecting a pod or a namespace and having the rules created. I can't remember if it was like for the endpoints or it was for a specific cluster API. I don't think that's a cluster API because it's routed to the endpoints, right? But if someone wanna take this one, please drop your name on the hat. So I think that's all for today. Anybody wants to discuss something?
We really would love for someone to take that services cap. I'm maxed out for sure. I think Ricardo is too. So for me, I think I probably will not be taking any more network policy caps on for the time being. I'm doing some other stuff in the Windows space right now, so I'm gonna keep babysitting all my stuff, but I can't take anything else on. Ricardo's saturated, so we really need someone to potentially own that services cap. Abhishek, you might know some folks, right? But
can see if anyone's interested from my team who wants to take this forward.
Yeah. Cool. I mean, it would be cool if it wasn't another VMware person, but like if nobody else, I think at VMware, we definitely have potentially people who might want to take one of these on, but if anyone else, I know there's a lot of people from different companies here, so sleep on it and let us know next week if you feel like you want to get, and we'll help you, right? Because we've kind of been through this and we've asked a lot of dumb questions, or at least I have, I know. And learned a lot. So we'll totally help anybody who wants to do this for sure, right? So you won't be going it alone, and it's totally something a beginner can do. You'll have the whole group here to support you, work on it with you, whatever you want.
Yeah.
But yeah, if not, Abhishek, I guess maybe we can find someone on our end. I don't know.
Yeah, I would also hope that there be somebody from the community. But no, I'll ask around.
So folks, next week, I think you are in the middle of a holidays in USA, right? Or it starts on Friday and ends on Sunday. I don't know, actually.
Monday is a working day, Ricardo.
Yeah? Okay,
Yeah.
so let's keep the meeting for Monday. And then if someone wants to take a look into this cap, or if we have any news about that, we can discuss this next week. So have a nice week, folks. Have a nice Thanksgiving for folks in USA.
Thank you.
Enjoy.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Happy
Bye,
Thanksgiving.
folks.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.